So for those of you out there that have a Dodge Ram 2500 5.9, I got a 2006, 2003 to 2006, are basically the same compatibility as far as belt wiring. How do you loosen the belt so that you can change out your power steering pump or any other accessory? Breaker bar can fit in there pretty tight. Let's come from the side over here. This will be the driver's side. This is the gearbox. You can get the end of here to turn into your tensioner, but how do you hold it open? And what I figured out is you can put a set of vice grips and set it up just high enough to where it hits your main pulley on your harmonic balancer dampener, and then just make sure it's good and tight. It'll keep your tensioner open without having to buy a specialized tool from Dodge. Alright. Alright, so the next step is going to be to disconnect the power steering pump. To get to that reservoir on the 2006 Dodge Ram 5.9 Cummins turbo diesel. If you have this power steering pump, you'll know that the new one you cannot buy from the dealership because they've done a part number revision. So you have to get these remanufactured. Will not come with a cap. There's another video on how to vent these caps, keep it from leaking, building up too much pressure. That's another thread. You can find them on the forums. Basically right in here is where your reservoir mounts to your power steering pump, and there's an O-ring on this, like so, and this O-ring goes right between these two units here. You're literally buying this pump so that you can get this O-ring. Some parts that you're going to need: T30 Torx bit to get to your reservoir, and .13mm socket to get to these 3 bolts, which you have to get through the pulley. In addition to that, you're going to want a pulley puller and a pulley installation kit. There's a video out there, a guy talks about don't use a hammer. And this is all you're going to need to put that pulley and seat it on the shaft of the new pump. Before you take off the old one, get a measurement so that you know your clearance and your back spacing. That way you don't have any alignment issues with your belt, which is probably going to be squeaking from the fluid that you've got seeping out of this old reservoir. That Dodge Ram knows is a bad design, but instead of fixing it, they've gone away with a different style, which means you got to change brackets if you go to the new style, the 2009.5. It's going to have different lines on it, which aren't going to plug into your power steering gearbox, which means you'll need to buy a new gearbox from a Ram 2500 or 5500, and that's not counting if you get into aftermarket parts. Aftermarket, which could rebuild your 06 to a better unit, or 2009 and newer aftermarket heavy duty parts. Borgeson, Redhead, some other people out there make mean green steering pumps. So this is the fix. Again, it's lifetime warranted part through O'Reilly. They're probably going to warranty out the money on this. I'd rather not be doing this every 2 years, but short of changing out the whole front end on this truck, this is kind of this is what we're limited to keep this from leaking all over the driveway. So get into this a little further and put something together that might be helpful to you. Next, you're going to want to pull your belt off of your pulley. I've already done that, but something that I found helpful in one of these other videos: don't remove the entire belt. It'll save you a lot of heartache when you have to get down here and try to route it. So just pick it up out of the way, throw a zip tie on it and keep it to the side. That way when you're ready to put your new pump in here, all you gotta do is break the zip tie, put the pulley on, pull your breaker off the bottom of the truck, release tension on that tensioner, and you should be good to go. Next, you're gonna want to Alright, so trying to film this while you're taking out the pump, not as easy as it looks. Probably why there's not a lot of videos out there with it. You got 3 bolts on here you're looking for. Start with the top one. It'll be the easiest one to get to. And then you just rotate your fan around to make room so you can pull your tool through here. Now that I got that one started, switch over something like this, and we'll see if we got enough clearance. You'll deal with this when you do it yourself. Trying to get that flashlight over the phone here. All right, looks like it's on there. Now you can see why I want the hand ratchet there. And I was wondering if I'd have enough room to pull this bolt out. You just kind of fish this radiator fan blade enough to create a gap that you can fit your tool and bolt through. And you'll do this on the other 2 as well. Alright, so we got the 3rd bolt. Well, there's just no good place to put a phone and shoot a video like this. You're not going to be able to get it out without removing the socket from the driver. Clearance, there it goes. That's where this little thing comes in handy. Now you can remove your driver. And access your socket. And if you leave one of these bolts out, it'll keep the pulley from turning too far in relationship to the other four holes on the pulley. So it might make it easier for you to get into your other two. So you can use the pulley as an index to find your holes without being able to see it. And drive this one out. Rotate the fan, remove the socket, and there's your other bolt. At this point, your pump should be able to work loose. Now you can get to your hoses, and you're going to pull your pump straight down. You may want to do your hoses before you undo that last bolt, so that you've got some mechanism to hold the torque that you're going to apply onto the flange on the high pressure line. The other one's going to disconnect, I believe, with a hose clamp. What we're working with here is our high pressure hose. None of my gear wrenches are going to be large enough to fit this. This is 18 millimeter, a 3/4. Dodge is lovely with the mixed, standard, and metric sizes. Neither of these are big enough to span that, so we'll have to go nasty and use a crescent wrench or something equivalent to hold on to that. So I'm going to grab the assortment here and run it on down. At this point in time, put your drain pan out and get yourself ready. It's going to get messy. Alright everybody, so we're getting ready to finish up the power steering pump installation on the 5.9 2006 Dodge Ram Cummins turbo diesel. Power steering pump on these, as you know, is a piece of garbage that Chrysler refuses to stand behind, so they did a part number revision, got rid of it. There's not a lot of videos on this typical procedure because it's very difficult to film while you're doing this job. You're going to want a headlamp. You're going to need a few different tools. I've covered that in some other videos I'm going to stitch together onto this. I'm not a video YouTube content producer. I'm just trying to pay this back to the community of people who may be needing to find a place to work on their vehicle because they don't know of any good shops that can handle this, that they can trust, or you just need to get done over the weekend so you can get to work on Monday. Whatever the case may be, you just enjoy working on your vehicle. I've got some insights onto this pump replacement which may be helpful to you. So as you can see now, I've got the pump installed. It's really tight for clearance. You're able to get the pump in through the top by moving your positive battery cable crossover up and out of the way, and then by fishing your hydraulic booster lines out of the way as well. You're going to have a low pressure return line underneath this. You'll need to remove that with a pair of pliers, or if you've got a set of hose clamp tools, those would work just as well, if not better. Be a good time to change out that rubber hose if you've got some. It's 5/8 and it's a pretty short length. So the other side here, you're going to want to make sure that you are bolted down before you attempt to remove or reinstall the high pressure line. I'm going to flip on the underside here and I'll show you why. Alright, so taking a look underneath here. And we'll flip this over. Alright, so there's your high pressure return behind it. I assembled that from the top of the vehicle with a new section of hose. Factory one's got a slight bend into it, so that straight hose is going to fight your pump alignment a little bit as you drop it in. You're going to want to pull your high pressure line out and make sure you put a new O-ring where the fitting attaches to your pump. You'll want to make sure that your pump is bolted in so that you can put the proper amount of torque. And I would recommend a flare nut. wrench if you have one. If not, you may not get the best seal, could potentially leak on you, which would kind of defeat the purpose of putting a new pump up here with a brand new seal that connects the reservoir to the pump, which is the notorious spot for the leak that you're going to get all over your gearbox, drop pitman arm, your sway bar, and your driveway, which is a real nuisance to the neighbors. So you don't want to be that person dropping a bunch of fluid out there and want to keep your vehicle in good shape. This is the recommended repair procedure, unless you do the upgraded parts number revision kit to include the 2009.5 newer pump, which then has a different fitting, which then will not fit your gearbox, which your new gearbox will not fit your lower output steering shaft. It's got a different spline count on it, so you'll need to change all of that, as well as your drop pitman arm. Your new gearbox is going to have a different gear count and spline count here, and none of your connecting hardware will be compatible unless you do the whole entire parts update kit. It's about $1,000 just for the parts hardware, and then you can get into doing different tie rods and ball joints and all the other fun stuff. All in all, it's about a $4,000 job. Anyways, back to this here. You can see the bolts. They're pretty cumbersome and hard to get to from underneath. It can be done. You just need to have pretty good manual dexterity. I will point out this bolt on the front of your timing chain cover will interfere with your pump's ability to drop in here and align on these 3 bolt holes, which you removed to get the old pump out. So getting down here with a long pry bar and gently applying pressure to your pump with regard to make sure that you're clear of any lines or harnesses or brittle plastic that you do not want to break. In order to have a successful repair, you will need to get this pulley, which you've now measured the back spacing so it matches your old one exactly, to clear that bolt. Once you get clear of that, you can finagle that into place. And then what I did was put the bolt here on the back side of the harness and frame bracket mount to anchor it into place. Once you've got that started, you can put your other 2 as you rotate your pulley around to get access to the round center holes, which will then correlate as index to your other 3 bolts, or 1, 2, and 3. Get your other 2 in there. Don't tighten them all the way up until you've got the 3rd one seated, in case you need to adjust for alignment or shim it one way or the other for proper fitment. At this point it's bolted on, so I can go ahead and install that high pressure line as so. Now, as you can see, clearance on this is pretty tight. You're not going to have a lot of room to maneuver your tool. You may have a long set of needle nose pliers, which would probably work out better up here. I kept the cap on because there's a lot of debris from the old pump. On that note, I'd recommend potentially, if you have some safety glasses to keep all of this stuff from falling into your eyes. Once you've got that started, now have access to your high pressure port, and now you can route your high pressure line over this one. Bring up your flare nut. get it seated inside there. And with one hand, if you're filming this like I am, run the other one. Take and catch a couple threads. And I'll check back here because I need the second hand. All right, a couple considerations on the installation of that high pressure line. Is you're going to make sure that you've got this line right here seated in this clip right here. Otherwise, it's going to fight you down below when you try to get your alignment for the hard line going into the lower part of the actual pump right next to the reservoir. All right, once you've got that set, come back down here and take a look. You'll notice this is off of your lower retaining bolt on the bracket for your power steering pump. And you may have to jiggle this to get in here. The tool you want, ideally, is going to be a flare nut, 18 millimeter, 3/4 inch socket. Once you got it in here, it should look like this. So a lot of threads hanging off. Make sure you don't cross thread. If you feel any binding, gently move your high pressure line back and forth until you can get the threads to catch. You want to make sure you get those threads in there nice and smooth. If your pump was leaking, you should have an abundance of fluid underneath that you can use to tap onto the threads in the O-ring. There's plenty of clean fluid hanging on the ends of these little drips, so I just grab a little bit like that and dab it around the threads and on the O-ring to get it to go in a little bit smoother. If you do run into a situation where you cross thread this high pressure line, you'll need to stop and redo everything that you just done. And you'll have to take this pump back out and get another one, unless you can chase these threads out. So do advise, take your time on this one. This one took me about 30 minutes to get it in here. It's poor lighting, it's hard to reach, and you really need two hands and ideally an overhead lift to properly access this line. Now before you can really finish, you're going to need to remove your breaker bar, and in order to do that, you're going to want to make sure your belt is now fastened onto your power steering pump pulley. So let's take a look at that. Now that we're out here, we can go ahead and remove our zip tie from our belt. And check the general condition of your belt while you have it off. This belt's recently been replaced. Also be a good time to check your idler pulley. It's got a little bit of play, but it had a little bit of play when I bought a brand new one on here. I wasn't too excited about that, but it's held up pretty good for at least a year and a half, and it hasn't made any further noise. So that was the ticking noise I found on this truck. Also, fluid seeps down from your pump, will get under your belt, and periodically it will chirp as it goes around the tensioner. So this would be a good time to clean your belt and inspect it for any burrs, frayed ends on your cable. This belt looks pretty good. And water will Make sure you're fully seated on the grooves. And lined up on your fan belt clutch where it runs on the back side of your belt. And that's about as much slack as I had when I put the breaker bar on the tensioner to release the belt from the power steering pump pulley. Now it's a good time to start taking your tools off of the vehicle. Keep in mind, you still don't have the cap on here yet, so remove that orifice dam and fill it with fluid. Check for any leaks on your lower, high and low pressure hoses that you just installed. Now that I've got my fluid in here, I filled it to about 3/4 of the way full to allow for any air that may have gotten trapped in the lines or fluid expansion to take place, that I can set the level to the proper amount once I've gotten to proper operating temperature. This will allow me, once I get down below, to observe for any leaks on the high pressure line that I just installed. You can use ATF4 fully synthetic transmission fluid in your power steering hydraulic pump, or you can use the Mopar equivalent, which would be in your owner's service manual. There's really no good way to shoot a video of it from down here. You're going to need 2 hands to break this set of vice grips and breaker bar off of your idle or tensioner pulley to relieve the excess tension on your belt. Then tighten it up onto all of your accessories on your drivetrain. These never come off that easy. And looking up the high pressure line, I don't see any fluid seeping down the threads yet, but I'm skeptical of that. So I like to observe it after I've had a chance to drive it, build some pressure up on the line, and make sure that it holds pressure. If it holds pressure and I don't have any leaks, it's been a successful repair. Things to note, I didn't document the removal and installation of the pulley because the phone battery had died during the initial phases of trying to document this power steering pump removal and installation procedure. But if you look closely here, I'm laying this power steering pump on the bench, putting this on the very back side of the pulley at about a 45-degree angle. You'll know it when you put the tape on there. You'll see what I'm talking about. This about the 3 13/16 mark is about the perfect back spacing for my particular pulley. Yours could vary, but if you forgot to measure, this is the measurement that I had. If you measure it flat, I got a different number, and it was close to 3 7/8. Actually, 14/16 would be 28-30 seconds. 27-30 seconds would be that mark just before it. So somewhere between those two marks, you should be okay. You'll know you're okay if your belt doesn't give you any issues. It should take you about a couple months down the road, but this is where you're going to want to refer back to if you start having issues with throwing belts or chewing a rib off the end of your belt that you have on there. Things to note. Alright, at this point you're ready to go and start your vehicle, and recommended procedure is to raise the front of the vehicle so the tires are off the ground, and turn it lock to lock 20 times to push any air out of the lines. I've never really had any problems with it, with the air in the lines, but take that advice for somebody who's just working on his own vehicle. If you do intend to work on this vehicle, I recommend following the proper procedures. You can bleed out the lines, you can use a vacuum pump on your lines, you can drive it on a closed area that's not on a public road. The hydraulic pressure on your power steering pump can also affect your braking for your hydraulic booster on your brake master cylinder. So there's also a hydraulic booster behind the master cylinder, and if you start having issues with spongy brake pedal or abnormal brake pressure, you're going to need to bleed the line and do it on a closed road. Before you take this vehicle out onto a public road, make sure it's safe to operate for yourself and people out there as well. That's my legal disclaimer. And the advice that you've received on this video is purely my observations working on my own vehicle. You're free to try anything that works for you. If you've got any observations or ideas on how to do this better, feel free to share it with the rest of the Cummins community, and that way we can keep our vehicles running on the road and hit that 1,000,000-mile motor mark. Before you take this vehicle out, well, that's it for now. This is my first video really working through a repair on 5.9 Cummins turbo diesel. This is a repair I've had to do twice already. I'm not a big fan of putting an aftermarket part, but the O'Reilly power steering pump seems to be the only option if you want to go with stock 5.9 2006 variety of pumps that are interchangeable with the pulley that you have, and not have to change out your gearbox and your hydraulic lines, booster, and any other assortment of parts that are not going to be compatible unless you switch over to the 2009 and a half and newer. And that's a full job. That's a full front end rebuild that I'm not sure if I want to undertake that kind of a front end rebuild. There's some aftermarket parts that are compatible with the 2006 Carly suspension ball joints and things of that nature, which are backwards compatible with the 06 variety of stock parts. So I'm looking at the different options on those. If you guys have any suggestions on you've encountered this same fork in the road with having to pick out parts, and you got any feedback on which ones work for you, I'd like to get out of this 2006 and a half style pump because it does have a tendency to leak. It's a bad design. Chrysler knew, I think they know that, but it started doing a part recall. They've just decided to supersede it with a newer part, which I've heard mixed reviews about that as well. People get intermittent braking issues, or they might lose their power steering, and then it comes back on them with the newer retrofit. So I've been a little risk averse on biting the bullet on that upgrade, but you know, truck's got 225,000 miles on it, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with the performance of this truck. It's a 14-second 5.9 Cummins, makes gobs of power. Just suspension could be a lot tighter and get this thing back to where it was performing when it was new. So, you know, with the 5.9, you don't have to deal with the 2007 federally mandated emissions and smog. You don't have to deal with DEF, diesel exhaust fluid pumps. It just makes life a lot easier. You can run biodiesel, you can run regular diesel. You don't have to deal with, a lot of places won't even make you do emissions on them. That may be good or bad depending, but a lot of the newer vehicles, it's an added layer of just bureaucratic red tape. And I think if you want to keep a vehicle and run cetane booster and run cleaner, that should be up to the owner. I run a pretty clean tune on this, so it doesn't make a ton of carbon. It is diesel, so it is prone to that, but it runs a 30% biodiesel blend, and you know, I think it's an alternative fuel. Get 20 miles to the gallon, so it's still, in my mind, economically a good option for sustainability. And I've kept another vehicle from going to wrecking yard and some garbage piece of modern vehicle equipment, the options out there I'm not too pleased with, really. You got a ton of electronics on there. Maintenance on them goes up through the roof. Now for a comparable truck like this to, you know, have all the options that I've got on here, you're looking at about $80,000. So for me, a weekend spent getting my hands dirty on changing out an old power steering pump. You know, I get a lot of joy in driving this truck, but you know, maybe at some point I'll have to get with a newer vehicle. But truck Norris has been a very trusty vehicle, and I've always been a big fan of it. It does everything I need it to do, and I don't see that a newer vehicle is going to really compare with what this thing is capable of putting out. Power-wise, torque, it's very comfortable on the road. It's got very good road presence. It's very safe, and you can get 1,000,000 miles out of this motor. So, you know, I'm pretty sold on this truck. I've had the transmission done. It's got all the performance parts that are going to address the 48RE shortcomings. BD Performance Products valve body with the 47RE retrofit kit for the transducer, governor pressure sensor solenoids, clutches, bands. What else do we have done to that? Your standard shift kit and billet lock converter. So it can handle the torque, it can handle the power, and I've had this transmission after its performance rebuild for going on 5 years. I've changed the fluid, checked the bands for adjustment, and made sure that the filters were clean. I do that every 30,000 miles, every fuel oil changes, changing out the fuel filter. The truck's been very reliable, with the exception of some electronic gremlins that I've had to track down. I can talk about those later, but for now, hope this video was helpful to you guys, my insights on the truck, and somebody asked that I make a video of this, so it's getting dark now, so signing off. Well, that's it for now.